Hello, you beautiful people. As many of you know, this is a pre-recording as opposed to our normal, insane, liver than live stream. That's simply because it was my birthday yesterday and I'm away. I'm away by the seaside, dipping my feet in English Sea. Absolutely. Holiday at home. And I will tell you all about it on Monday. But I've lined up a series of wonderful guests for you, people who have something important to say, each and every one of them. And all my guests are wonderful, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't choose them. And these are just some more wonderful, wonderful guests. Now I'm blithering. I'm going to stop that. But I just want to say thank you all so much for always being here with us. We're on episode 24 now. Can't believe it. And when I walked out of today's News Talk TNT, I had no clue what I was going to do. Like no clue at all. I walked away from a decent salary, didn't have any great money to use, and because that had all been previously used for other reasons. And I just kind of jumped off the cliff and hoped that somebody would catch me, and you did. And that is why I rock up here every Monday and Friday, and also on the occasional Wednesday now, moving forward with an extended recorded interview. So if you have any suggestions of people that you'd like me to interview, probably won't be for YouTube. That's kind of the purpose of it, really, because there's a lot of stuff, obviously, that I'm unable to discuss on YouTube. But if there's anybody that you would like me to talk about, feel free to drop me a line at Sonia Poulton, Sonia with an I, at sky.com. Just let me know who you'd like me to interview. I'm going to start off with a subject that means a great deal to me. It matters to me. It's a subject that's really close to my heart. It is the disappearance of arguably the world's most famous missing child, Madeleine McCann. She disappeared on 3rd of May 2007. And I'm going to be talking very shortly, as you will see, to podcasters Only Cans, Craig and Zoe, and they're people that I've come to know really well over the last few years, and I have a great deal of time and respect for what they're doing on their podcast. It's a true crime podcast, but they've done a series. They've done a series of episodes to do with Madeleine McCann, and they've got a new one coming up tomorrow. So this is absolutely the perfect time to bring them on the live stream. Make way for them. Here they come. Well, as I told you, I am delighted to be joined on the screen right here and now by Zoe and Craig from Only Cans. Now, a little known fact, but Zoe is actually the mod on this very stream. Right. So she's an absolute darling. We love her very, very much. But that isn't why they're here. They're here because I'm an actual admirer of what they're doing on Only Cans. So Only Cans, it's a crime podcast. Is it available exclusively on YouTube, or can people get it on other platforms as well?
I've just literally linked it to Rumble, because we do have another couple of streams coming up that would like to speak out with YouTube community guidelines. So probably like other platforms have done, we'll start for a half hour, then go over to Rumble. And we might go to other platforms as we grow, but I'm just still learning, Sonia. It's still all quite new to us. So yeah, Rumble and YouTube for now. And possibly X if we hook up the premium thing with the blue tick and all that, yes. But for
Yeah.
now, YouTube and Rumble.
And you're doing really well. I was looking at some of the figures so far. I mean, in all fairness, your baby's in this, right? But your figures are really impressive. So let's have a look at some of them. 320K on TikTok, 30K on YouTube, a 5 million viral tweet, 1 million views on all of the Only Cans tweets put together. This is excellent stuff. Tell us about the birth of Only Cans. How did it come to be and why?
Well,
Craig, do you want to go for this? Yep.
yeah, so that it's a really interesting. So actually through you, me and Zoe met and became friends. And I was like laying off a lot of the Madeleine stuff to Zoe, and she couldn't believe it. And she was saying, why don't we go and do something on YouTube? Why don't you come on and say, just spit facts, talk about the PG files, come on, discuss it. And it kind of grew from there. We didn't, it's quite interesting because we didn't mean it to grow the way it has. It's kind of been like what Zoe would say is like organic. It's been
Yes.
naturally started growing. Because if you look back after the first episode, we kind of said we're just going to park this at that. But then we realized there was so much more to it. People were requesting us to go and do a part 2. We were getting so much comments, and that I think that's where we're so proud, is because we don't do it for, I think the word is clout that is used. We don't do it for that. We're only interested in speaking about the truth, and really the facts. And of course, we've got like a really good on-screen chemistry between the two of us, and it just works really well. And yeah, it's like we've known each other all our lives. It's really bizarre. It's quite.
Well, I've met you both together, and you are literally like brother and sister from a different mother, really. In
Absolutely.
truth, I mean, it's really it's wonderful. It's wonderful to see it. But here's the thing: what Craig has just said, Zoe, and I think it's interesting, and I know it's a fact, is you don't do it for clout, and that's one of the reasons why I'm more than happy to support you, because you're not fame chasers, right? You do this because you feel it has to be done. That was exactly the reason that I set about doing my documentaries on Madeleine McCann as well, for exactly those reasons, because nobody else was doing what I could see needed to be done. And so you came with Only Cans. And it's really important to stress people that Only Cans is not only about Madeleine McCann, but that is an ongoing series of theirs. But you've also covered JonBenét Ramsey as one example. That was a Christmas special, right? And that went really well. Zoe, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think we didn't want to stick. I mean, we didn't plan on doing any of this, Sonia, to be fair. We had our little wee streams with me and Craig having a laugh. And then, like Craig said, we got him on. And there isn't just, we don't like people that monetize off Madeleine. Purely, we know people have got to eat and stuff, but for us, it's all about the truth and the fact. But we kind of had to go somewhere else as well and not just stick to the Madeleine case, because we needed to keep with the times. And the JonBenét one just absolutely, it, basically we fell head into it, and then the one that we done was amazing. Oh, hold on 2 seconds, my screen's just frozen. There we go. So yeah, we done the JonBenét one, and that took off better than we thought it would. And then it sort of made us want to go to other cases. So we do have a couple other cases that we're looking into. It's not all going to be Madeleine McCann, but there's so much facts, truths, rabbit holes, conspiracies attached to that case that we've ended up to a part 6, Sonia, from our little show that we were going to do to part 6, and it's looking like probably a part 7, to be fair, as well.
Of course it will
So
be.
yeah,
We can all see it now. And the thing is that part 6 is actually available tomorrow. So you don't even have to wait very long, peeps. You don't even have to
yes,
wait. And
Exactly.
so part 6 is really about why the truth matters when it comes to the case of missing Madeleine McCann, isn't it? And I think both of you are absolute sticklers about that. Craig, you, like me, you've been to the scene of crime twice. And I think it's your walk where you showed. Now tell people about that walk that really took off and went viral.
Yeah, so when I was there, one of my aims was to try and bring the case to life. There's a difference between reading it and hearing about it than and actually being at the scene. You'll know as well as I do, when you're there, it is breathtaking. Like I was just absolutely stunned. So I decided to do the walk from the apartment out, round and back into the tapas to try and give an idea of just how far it was, because the McCann stated it was just like having dinner in your back garden. I always felt like that was maybe a little bit misleading. So I tried to show that with the walk out and round and back in, and going exactly to the table where they were, and then looking up at the apartment, so you could kind of get an idea just what was going on back in 2007. Now that went absolutely insane on TikTok. Like that went, I still now I'm getting, the comments are just crazy. The comments are, it seems to be a lot of American people are catching on to it, and they cannot believe the distance. They're just absolutely stunned. And a lot of people don't realize that, according to, I'm obviously going to be careful, but according to what Jerry says, is that in his first statement on May 4, they were going out and up, you know, where Jane Tanner seen the guy walking away. A lot of people don't realize that they were doing that. They think that they were just hopping over the pool and going up to the apartment. So it's trying to bring it to life
Yes.
And that seems to have really gathered momentum because it's real. It's backed up by all the evidence, all the statements. So it's going really well.
And it's brilliant to see. And I think so that was your last one, I think, where you reported live from Praia de Luz. And obviously you're out there, roving reporters, Zoe being a brilliant anchor back at base, and you bring it all together. And I think it meshes together really well. Actually, I think it works together. Yeah, I do. I think it works together really well. So Zoe, you relatively new to this case, but the stuff you know now outpaces many people who
Wow.
have been on this case for a very long time. You had a steep learning curve, girl.
I had 3 days of constant research. I worked out I'd actually done 18 hours research, and that was for part one.
Wow.
I did have a feeling that it wasn't all right, this case. And my son was the same age as Madeleine. So it was very, it was in my life a lot. I remember Dylan saying, have they not found that wee girl yet? When you'd see like the news billboards and stuff. So the first time I seen a video of Kate and Jerry basically doing their public appearance, something in my gut went, oh, wait a minute, this is just a bit strange. And then fast forward 20 years, Craig and I start chatting. The stuff that he knew about it, as he says, I was like, you have to come on the show. You've got to come on the show. And because Craig does protect me, because I do suffer a little bit like anxiety and things, he wanted to protect me from the trolls, which I thought was beautiful. But I was like, do you know what? I don't care. Let's just do this for Madeleine. Whatever happens, whatever happens.
Well
In
done.
touch wood, we've actually been okay on the channel. We have a little in the comments, but I just ignore, just don't look down.
I take his point though, because they are horrendous. The whole
Oh,
kind of
absolutely.
pro and anti McCanns online, which was really
Absolutely.
created by the McCanns themselves, because that's how they described people. So they immediately created a division anyway. But Zoe, I think you went into it, full steam ahead, like such intense research, and got up to speed like in no time, which is proof, people, when you want to get your head around a case, you can.
Oh, yeah.
Right. But
Mhm.
it's hard work. So you are now on episode 6. It's going brilliantly. Let's talk about episode 6, why truth matters. Part of it is based around, you're going to be talking about this book, The Sudden Impulse, right? And that is, of course, by Bernd Stellander, also known as the Foreign Detective. He was actually on the very first episode of this show, and I've promised to do a long form interview with him when I finish this book. And I've no idea when that will be, because this book is far from finished.
Yep.
Have you managed to finish this book yet?
I did. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Mate, see, this is what I'm telling you, people. Amazing. Well, talk to me. What are your thoughts about it?
So,
Craig?
right, I'm going to try and be polite, because I know Bernie and I like him, and I've met him as well, and he's a lovely guy. He really is a really lovely guy. But it's almost like putting business to the next side. And what I know about the case, I struggle with the book at certain points. And Bernie knows this. I've brought this up with Bernie. So it's not anything that I'm saying that's, I'm doing it behind his back or saying anything against him, because let's be honest. Anybody who comes out and says, I don't believe that Madeleine was abducted, straight away I'm like, okay, let's hear it. Let's hear what you've got to say. I struggled with the book because, I found it a rehash of Richard D. Hall's work for the first few hundred pages. Bernie then goes on to say that he has cameras set up and he has evidence to suggest certain things were going on. I am waiting to see, or where is that evidence? To come out with that and then not produce it, I find pause for thought. What are you really doing here?
Because he's actually saying he's caught the McCanns, right, visiting what he believes to be the grave, the makeshift grave of their daughter.
Now I take, right, I'm just going to go in here, right? So I really struggle with this, because why would they go away, bury her up on that hill and put an M down where she's buried in Praia de Luz in that hill at a tourist spot? It's absolutely insane. The McCanns are not daft. They're not silly people. These are very, very clever people. They're not going to do that, right? That's just my input into that. Bernie totally dismisses the Smithman sighting. Now, the Smithman sighting is, in my opinion, the most crucial sighting. That was the tweet that went viral that I put up, over 5 million impressions. because people are interested in facts.
Tell us about the Smithman sighting for those who
I'm
don't know.
so pleased you asked that, actually, Sonia, if you give me a second. Okay, so the
Love it.
Smithman sighting is probably the most crucial sighting in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Now, Martin Smith, I'm going to read exactly what he said. So Martin Smith stated that he passed an individual that would have been around 10 o'clock at night. At that time, he was completely unaware that the child had disappeared. He'd only became aware of the disappearance of the child the next morning through his daughter in Ireland. She'd sent him a message and said that somebody was missing or something like that. So Martin then gave a description of the individual who was carrying the child down towards the beach area, 10 o'clock at night. So the description, I'm just going to give you it now. So he was Caucasian, around 175 to 180 meters in height. He appeared to be about 35 to 40 years old. He had an average build, a bit on the thin side. His hair was short and a basic male cut, brown in colour. He can't state if it was dark or lighter in tone. He did not wear glasses, had no beard or moustache, and he didn't notice any other sort of significant features. He did notice that he was wearing cream or beige coloured cloth trousers in a classic cut. He didn't see any shoes, and he did notice that the body of the clothing, he couldn't describe the fashion of it. He says it was just a bit sort of unique. He stated that the child he was carrying, now this is crucial, right? I want everybody to pay attention to this. This is so crucial. The child he was carrying was female and about 4 years of age. She was similar to his granddaughter of the same age, and she was a child of normal build, about 1 meter in height. Not absolutely certain though, because of the way she was being carried, which was up over the shoulder. The child was blonde. Her hair was kind of light. Her skin was very white, and he didn't notice her eyes, as it appeared that she was asleep or her eyelids were closed. Now that is a statement, a police statement that was given. That man has never came forward, who was seen carrying that child down to the beach. And Martin Smith later went on to state he was 60 to 80% sure that the man was Jerry McCann that he seen carrying the child down towards the beach.
Now, here's the thing, Zoe. What's interesting about that, of course, is that, and Craig and I have talked many times about this, is that was on May the 3rd. And that was shortly after the time that Madeleine was said to have been reported missing, right? So we know that much. And so that absolutely follows. So Craig, am I understanding, Craig, that you absolutely believe that whatever happened to Madeleine happened on May the 3rd, as we've been told? Okay, that takes us right. Let me just bring it to Zoe.
Let's make this another podcast, Sonia.
No, I understand. I take your point, because that's Bernie's point, isn't it, Zoe? That actually the timeline is all wrong. That it actually happened the day before, on May the 2nd. Whatever happened to Madeleine. So Zoe, tell me your thoughts, because that's the Smithman sighting, the famous Smithman sighting that Craig has just referred to, which, if that is true, and I think that the fact that the person has never ever come forward, is very interesting in itself. But if that is true, that means that it doesn't have to be that something happened to Madeleine on the 3rd. Something could have happened to her the night before, and then they disposed of her on the 3rd. Zoe, take it away. What are your thoughts?
On the book as well, I have to say that, because I have done a little bit of research, but the book is amazing if you don't know anything about the case. If you're hell-bent that she was definitely abducted, or you're a little bit up in the air about it, please do get the book, because he goes into such detail that proves that she couldn't have been abducted as such. He does refer to the PJ files and statements mostly, and I think that's why it's such a big book, is that he does repeat himself a lot in it, but you have to, because he has to show, he said that, she said that, but later on. So it is repetitive. I personally feel that Madeleine came to her demise probably on the 2nd or before, but not on the 3rd. I feel that the 3rd was just too much, raising the alert. I feel that they had to come up with something beforehand. There was too much of a cover-up. I feel that the body's been moved about, so easily the Smithman sighting could have happened after, moved about and then sort of taken her away whilst everybody's distracted looking for a missing child as such. So yeah, there's things I don't agree with in the book after my wee research, but there's things I've learned as well. So it is a fabby book, I have to say.
I have to point out that when you say your we research, as I say, you have researched more than many people now who've been looking at this for years. So let us not take anything away from what you've learned, because I think it's quite phenomenal.
Thanks.
The ground that you've covered, truly I do. And
Thank you.
actually, which brings me to something else, Zoe, that I'd like to ask you with fresh eyes, because this is
Mhm.
something that Zoe and I have talked about on a number of occasions, but I really would like your input on this. And that is, do you have any explanation about why this became so high profile with political involvement? Any idea?
I've got a really kind of out there reason.
Well, let's hear it.
You're on
Yeah,
YouTube.
yeah, I know. There is links of Jerry and Kate being interested in experimental medicine, and also with the children all being IVF. I personally feel that there could have been a little bit of like a DNA or a genetic thing. I'm not saying like super soldiers or anything. I'm not going that deep. But with her having the now, is it columba? I always get this word
Columboma.
wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, the eye.
Coloboma, sorry.
Yeah.
That's a genetic defect. And because my son's had genetic defects in other ways, I kind of know a little bit about it. So I personally feel that they had to hide Madeleine being found because they were going to discover that she'd kind of been, her genetics had been played about, kind of thing. But that's
Wow.
just my personal opinion. And I know it's
Wow.
totally out there.
Well,
Totally out there.
the thing is, it's a totally out there case. So
Exactly.
it's sort of all the cards are on the table, whatever it could be, because we know that it's an unusual situation, that it's rumbled on all this time since 2007. There is clearly establishment protection from one prime minister after another, one home secretary after another. There's been police protection. This has been investigated by three countries at least: Portugal, Germany, and England. So it is, I think, we can allow some outside thinking. I think that's really important. But Craig, I want to bring you on to another thing, and that is, you are in no doubt whatsoever, as indeed am I, that Madeleine McCann was not only not abducted, but chances are she didn't make it out of that apartment alive, right?
Yeah, there's all people say there's no evidence. Now, the only bit of this that there is no evidence is that she was abducted. There's actually, I believe, a mountain of circumstantial evidence that involves the parents of the child. There is actually, now I'm going to quote the European Court of Human Rights here, there was biological traces left behind of Madeleine. The European Court of Human Rights quoted saying blood and cadaver. Now, you can't just explain that away. Now, there was a great quote I seen that said, you wouldn't look at a 2024 crime with 2007 technology.
Yeah.
So why are we not taking those biological traces that the PJ hold, the Met Police hold the original DNA results, that should be getting looked at now with the help of AI and the help of DNA advanced technology, and we should now be able to put this case to bed, but there is no interest to take it that far.
And that's a pity, isn't it? Because obviously I've talked to Dr. Mark Perlin. It is Mark Perlin, isn't it?
Yeah.
I have issues with remembering names, as you all know. But yeah, I talked to Dr. Mark Perlin, and he has repeatedly offered a free analysis to the Metropolitan Police. And given that this has cost us a minimum of £14 million out of taxpayers' money for a crime that, as I say, did not happen in this country, but we're still footing the bill. And yet somebody who is, and Craig, can you tell people a little bit about what it is that Mark Perlin does?
Well, Mark Perlin, he can dissect the DNA. So I think that what people try and say is that especially the DNA that was located in the hire car boot, it can be a bit sort of, people are trying to say that Kate and Jerry's DNA in there, it was touch DNA. It could have been spread from, Madeleine's clothes. And Mark Perlin says that he can dissect all of that, separate all the DNA out, and he can tell you categorically whether or not that was Madeleine's DNA that was in the boot of the hire car. Now, we already know, statistically speaking, 15 out of 19 markers found, right? We already know the chances of probability of that being Madeleine is above 80%. So this is a bit that I spoke to Mark Sinuka about the DNA, and it was like, you don't just say, we've got her DNA, she was in the hire car boot. You start working it through chances of probability, and so 80% of that is found in the boot, Then we've got the blood dog alerting at the tile behind the couch. Then we've got Madeleine's never been seen since. So you start piecing it all together, and then it should be correct police work would be pause that, bring the parents in, explain. That's what should be happening. Mark Perlin he's going to just be ignored by them because they've no interest to find out whether or not Madeleine is
Extraordinary. I
It
think
is
that's a
incredible.
smoking gun in its own right,
It
you know,
totally
when
is,
somebody
yeah.
comes
Absolutely.
along who is highly acclaimed like him. This is not just some bod off the internet. This is somebody whose
Yeah.
work is used by American authorities,
Yeah.
right? So this is somebody who knows what he's doing, and he offers a free test. It makes no sense. So here's the thing, Zoe, is that given all the three people on this screen believe very sadly that Madeleine is no longer alive, who is Julia Wendelt?
Yeah. Julia is a Polish girl, I believe, who thinks that she is possibly Madeleine McCann, that she was trafficked as a child. Now, we first discovered this, I think it was on Instagram a couple of years ago, Craig, wasn't it? When it was the I Am Madeleine, which
I remember you
seen she's-
sending to me.
Yeah, remember that. And we dug deep and we found a lot of SEX working ones on Twitter that was linked to Julia as well. I don't want to say too much on YouTube.
Yeah.
So yeah, before those were all removed, because we actually found them before. But I just feel that Julia is a very lost girl who possibly has had quite a traumatic childhood. We will be discussing more on the show tomorrow on Only Cans, going a wee bit sort of a deep dive on her with kindness. It's just the other big podcasters giving her a platform. She's got all these pictures where she's comparing herself to Jerry, to Kate, to even to Madeleine's sister. It's Emily, isn't it? Which I think is really bad taste. Leave the siblings out of it. You know, they're innocent in my eyes. And I just feel that Julia needs to find herself and she's looking in the wrong way. I do wish the best for her, but I think she really needs to realise that she's not Madeleine, and the phone calls that she's had with Operation Grange and things are an eye-opener. Like you said before, why are they not taking Mark Perlin's offer up of a free one? Here's, say Operation Grange think that she's been abducted, why are they not testing a girl's DNA that's coming forward and saying that she thinks she's Madeleine? They would be like, yeah, we'll test that, put
Right.
it to bed, move on. This is what
Right.
the whole thing for me is. I'm just, yeah.
It's
So,
almost like
yeah.
they know there's no point, right? I mean, that was the only interesting thing that I've
Exactly.
got out of all of this, Craig. And I did comment on this, and I actually think it's exploitation of her to put her on these podcasts because she appears to be clearly unwell. She appears to have some psychological issues going on. I think she looks absolutely the spit of her mother, and that is not Kate McCann. I can see her mother all over her. But the thing is, Craig, so that telephone conversation, I think arguably is really the only enlightening thing out of all of this kind of exploitation of her, because she made a phone call to Operation Grange, right? And they were not interested, which in itself told me they're not interested because they know that there's no reason to. Can you pick that up for me?
Yeah, that's if you actually believe that was Operation Grange on the phone.
Ah,
Now, I've got a point in that. Right?
You just thrown a stick of dynamite in the middle of this.
Exactly. So I don't believe that was. So yeah, I'm just going to say it, guys. So it was on John Atwood's program, right? And I would encourage anybody who's interested in the case, if you ever pick up this, because there's thousands and thousands of views going to this, right? There was, I think I last looked, there was over 300,000. It's probably even more now.
Yeah.
So there is people
Pure
that
clickbait.
Exactly, right. And now I've got so much to say on this that I'm going to try and dilute it down, right? But I don't believe that was Operation Grange on the phone. The guy did not give his rank. He didn't address her at all. He actually descended into arguing with her on the phone. She was
yes.
Like, at what point does a police officer start arguing with you on the phone, right? I've only had small dealings with the police, nothing serious, right? But they don't tell you anything on the phone. They just say, come down to the station, we want to see you.
It's true.
They're not going to sit there and speak to you about a case like this. I mean, I was blown away by people getting sucked in straight away. I was like, that's not Operation Grange. What is interesting as well is that Julia, right, has overtaken Madeleine on Google. So if you Google Madeleine, Julia comes up. Now that you throw in we've not even touched on Bruckner, but you throw in Bruckner, he comes up when you type in the DNA in the dogs, and what always rings in my head is Richard D. Hall's thing, buried by mainstream media. That is exactly what's happening. You can't find Madeleine's case anymore. It's just buried. It's gone.
Wow. So let's get this straight. Obviously, Craig has just mentioned Christian Bruckner. He is the German patsy that Gonzalo Amaral, the original police coordinator from Portugal, he said there would be a German patsy. And Christian Bruckner has turned out to be the German patsy. And they tried every which way, didn't they, in court to throw in Madeleine and try and, even though Christian Bruckner was not in court about Madeleine has not been charged to do with Madeleine. And it now looks highly likely they're going to have to release him anyway. But the thing is that he was a clear patsy, but that's astonishing. I didn't realize that. So when we do a search on the main search engine, Google, for Madeleine McCann, we come up with an imposter and a man who has been falsely accused. That is outrageous.
Exactly.
That's actually outrageous. No
It's
wonder.
incredible. It's incredible.
No wonder you feel the need to do what you do.
This is exactly it. This is you've absolutely hit the nail on the head, and this is what drives me on, because it hurts me. Like I've read the police evidence, over 11,000 pages. I've read it inside out. I could recite statements for you. I know that I've been to the place.
You're like a dictionary on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Love him.
And do you know what
I know,
really
it puts me in the shade as well, Zoe. I know, it's like he is literally like data on this.
But do you know what really frustrated me, right? When it comes down to it, what really frustrated me about the Julia stuff, now this really bothered me, is that she said, I have to say, for the research for Only Cans, I did watch 6 hours of Sean Atwood's interviews with her, right?
Wow.
And I've got a book full of notes. So she says that she's done her own research and she believes that she could be Madeleine McCann. In 6 hours of a podcast, she did not reference the PJ files once. No reference at all. Never mentioned. Nope, never mentioned.
Astonishing.
Isn't
Astonishing.
it?
And also, let's not forget that she also emerged after all the SEX work that you're talking about and those kind of links that we're hearing about. She also emerged with this psychic, didn't she? Was that woman a psychic?
Fia. That was Fia. Yeah. She now blames Fia for the DNA test done on Dr. Phil. If you remember, she went on Dr. Phil as well. And he done a DNA test and it came back that she was pretty much 100% Polish. And she was like, no, that was all Fia's fault now, that she done something there. So we just move on from that. And I'm now on Atwood's programme. And she also, an incredible part on Atwood's programme was the ID. Now, I was just gobsmacked, because this is how I knew right away this wasn't Madeleine. Forgetting all the PG files and the dogs and the DNA. The columboma in her eye. Right, that does not get better, that does not heal, that does not fade. Often as you develop into your teens, that will require surgery, right? Now, it also can affect your vision, it affects your life. Now, on Atwood's programme, Julia is actually sitting there saying, I think I had a columboma, but I either went away or I think I maybe got surgery when I was wee and didn't know about it. And I'm just... And nobody's pressing her on it. They're all sitting there like, oh, wow, yeah. And the comments are going crazy saying, yeah, that could have happened. I'm sitting there thinking, I'm in cuckoo land here. Like, I'm blown away by it. It's incredible, because that's Madeleine's mark.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really reprehensible when they've brought in like psychological experts who really should know better than to get involved in something like that. It's nasty, exploitative stuff. Unlike Only Cans, which you can see tomorrow, 6 p.m. Zoe, finish us off about tomorrow.
Well, tomorrow you'll have to find out basically everything that we can't see on the stream. And before I go, Sonia, and before Craig go, I just want to wish you an absolutely happy birthday. I hope you have a brilliant ball. I hope you spoil yourself and your week is filled with blessings. And here's a wee for you.
Happy birthday,
that's what
Sonia.
I'm finishing on. Happy birthday, darling.
I love this girl and I love this guy. These indeed are Craig and Zoe from Only Cans, but I'm also proud to say they are people that I love and trust. And actually, they're people I met online. And you know, it's so hard, isn't it, to trust people that you meet online? But over the years, these two have proven themselves over and over again, and I
Sonia,
trust them implicitly.
Just to interject there before we finish up, I looked back over our messages. It was over 7 years ago. I don't think I gave you much option to be my friend or not. I was like, that's it.
Well, I'm glad you didn't. It's an absolute pleasure to know you both, everybody. This is Zoe and Craig from Only Cans. Do not miss tomorrow. I'm going to put a link in the description to the show.
Thank you, Sonia.
Lovely to have you with us.
Thank you. Bye.
So I have a question. What is the current point of Carol Vorderman, she being a British celebrity that we're all sick of? Well, I know I am. Boobs and politics is our Carol. She first came to fame on a Channel 4 programme, Countdown, and by all accounts, a brilliant mathematician. This is what we were told about her. This was the narrative we were fed. After Countdown, she took to posting various thirsty for compliments pictures on social media. She was the fake news so-called political voice to emerge during C19 and asking questions about the theft that was taking place in Parliament regarding MPs getting their mates and sometimes local pub landlords, giving them rather C19 contracts for protective clothing and the like. I thought, okay, she's not speaking out about COVID, but at least she's highlighting the corruption, so all good. That was until I saw a shot of her at Cheltenham races hobnobbing with the very man she was publicly claiming to be holding to account. Of course, she had an explanation for the reason why she was with Matt Hancock at a racecourse, but it is what it is, and I see through people like her. Carol Vorderman is a celebrity political voice, and you know what comes along with that, right? A radio show, work on the media circuit, and a new book. Due out next month, September 2024, in fact. It's about her political journey, so by rights, it should be relatively short. Save yourself the money if you want to know what she has to say, and I suspect you don't, because she is a prolific poster of her political opinions on social media, and I'm sure it will surprise none of you that I report in recent times she's been starting to sound more and more like Big Brother than Big Brother. So I would suggest the point of Carol Vorderman is to prop up her beloved Labour. That's the point of Carol Vorderman. She's propaganda in tight clothes and leather pants. I want to introduce you to somebody that I have long admired. Her name is Madeleine, and she has been a campaigner for children ever since she discovered that one of her best friends and head teacher of her children was abusing 3 of her children. Madeleine is a formidable woman. Do not miss this interview. Let's bring her in. I am beyond delighted to be joined by Madeleine. Now, a very good friend of mine introduced us, and I'm so grateful because I've actually been a long-term admirer of Marilyn's work without her even realizing. And one of the reasons why is because she became very outspoken in the public domain about 20 years ago. And I thought, now that is somebody to watch. And here she is. It's funny how the cycles of life go on and on and on. Madeleine is a campaigner, but that is a small description for everything she does. And she's the CEO from Freedom from Abuse. Welcome, Madeleine. Absolutely lovely to have you with us.
Absolute pleasure, Sonia. It is weird, isn't it? Circles within
So
circles.
weird.
It's very strange.
It's so weird. When I realized it was you who my friend was talking about, I was like, I know who this woman is. I've watched what she's done. So obviously, some of the stuff that I want to discuss with Madeleine will get me in terrible trouble on YouTube. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to be able to put a little bit on YouTube on this show today, but a bigger interview will be coming next week on Rumble and on X, where Madeleine will be able to discuss in detail her story, which is absolutely, utterly mind-blowing. And just to give you a little taste of it, it actually involves Madeleine pursuing a man who was actually somebody she loved and trusted very much, who had abused her sons. Just give people a brief overview of that, Madeleine.
Well, he was my best friend for 17 years, who I actually met in church, and he was the new head teacher of the church primary school. I was already teaching. I then got involved with working at that school as head of music, deputy head, and over many years we became very close friends. I was going through a divorce, so I became vulnerable, right? He was admired, loved by everybody, drop-dead gorgeous guy, come to bed with me eyes, really attractive. And I was vulnerable, and I thought, oh, it is lovely to have this friend. Little did I know anything else, because back then nobody knew about grooming. Nobody knew. We didn't even talk back then, all those years ago, about in intrafamilial abuse. Yeah. So I was shocked when I had then left the area and I got a ding dong on my doorbell from Thames Valley Police, and we were then living in Sussex, to say, we've come to talk to you about potential paedophilia with your best friend. I could not believe it. It was like a tsunami coming through my living room. And from then that's when the fun and games really started. And I had a nervous breakdown on the back of that, but it didn't stop me. And I was tried to be closed down by just about everybody, including government. Well, that's later story, but I've never
Well,
given up, and I am passionate about preventing any harm to children. It is their absolute human right that they are kept safe, and the only people that can do that are the adults. And so many adults do not want to understand how grooming works. They don't want to think it can affect them. It's massive. It's as common as cornflakes.
it's
And
shocking. Shocking.
it breaks my heart that it didn't get mentioned in the King's speech.
I
And no
know.
one's ever done anything about it in the 23 years I've done this.
Which is why what you do is so vital, because you actually educate children, don't you? You educate schools and you educate children. And you're absolutely right. Who knew about grooming 20 years ago, right? They didn't. They simply didn't, about the coercion involved. So
Yeah.
as you say, that's going to be saved for the longer video. But it is absolutely vital what you do. But what we can talk about on YouTube is government intervention. Because when you told me, it just about blew my mind. You were issued with a D notice. Tell
Yeah.
people what a D notice is.
Well, I didn't know what it was. This was 2004. And I was contacted because I won a court case, which we will talk about later. But it was so extraordinary, apparently, what happened. It was so extraordinary that I was contacted by Mark Easton. He is now the social affairs commentator for and reporter for BBC. At the time, he was making a documentary called Judges in the Dock. And he contacted me when we came back from the court case. We arrived home. I don't know how he found my number. Anyway, and he said, I'm doing this documentary for Channel 4. And your judge is on my hit list. And he said, I'm doing a documentary on circuit judges who are, over time and time again, actually letting off paedophiles and sex offenders. And your judge is on my list. Can I come and interview you? So we did a huge thing. I was on it for ages, and, you know, big documentary, and out it went. Well, then I got stalked. I had death threats put in my letterbox. I was stalked for 6 months with things under my windscreen saying, "We are watching you," which was really awful. I mean, I had horrible messages left on my phone. So the police took my phone and said they thought people were being paid to read a script because the diction, inflex and everything else, and the vocabulary didn't change. It was exactly the same. So it was really scary. And then up pops in my email box something from government. And now I'm quite naive. I'd had a nervous breakdown. I was still very ill on depression and anxiety pills. And in my inbox comes this thing, "Oh, Schedule D notice. How exciting. What is this?" And so I then, I was so excited because I had some very, very auspicious names on it, right? And I was, there were names, I don't know if I can mention the names. I mean,
Name them. Was this
Right.
Tony Blair's government?
This was Tony Blair's government. This document was signed by Tony Blair. And
It was signed by Tony
it was signed
Blair,
by Tony
the
Blair
Prime
and
Minister.
MI5 as well. And I was gobsmacked, and it had names that have now become household names. Lord Janner, Cyril Smith, Leon Britton, and there were 3 others, and I can't remember, but I think one guy was linked to the army. I think, I can't remember, but I was just, I must ring my lawyer. So I rang my lawyer up, and he said, "Oh my word, get rid of it, get rid of it." And I said, "Well, why? I mean, look, this is dynamite." And he said, no, it's really dangerous. And I said, "Well, like what?" He said, "You know, if you put a step wrong and you mention any of these people,
Right.
literally you can be taken out." I said, "Oh, and at that time, I don't know if you remember him, Professor David Kelly, who was trying
course.
to prove the
Cover
stuff
it-
on the
cover him a
Iraq
lot.
War." Yeah, and he ended up with a poison dart, didn't he, in his backside, yeah? So
Yeah.
I said, "Oh."
But they said he'd cut his wrist, didn't they?
Yeah, rubbish.
That was right.
Rubbish. If you've ever
Right.
read the book, it's rubbish.
Right.
So anyway, I went, "Oh my goodness, oh my goodness." So I went, "Oh, I'll delete it." Well, I wish I hadn't, because over time I was told I should never
fear.
mention. I should
Fear.
never mention that I got a Schedule D notice. Oh, I mustn't mention it. But
Yeah.
since then, in the last 2 or 3 years, it's all that time before the fear left. But about 10 years ago, some people I know in media very well just jokingly said to me in a pub one day, you know, "Oh, we think you're safe now." I went, "What do you mean? I never thought I wasn't." And they said, "You have no idea. You were this lone wolf barking off rightfully about the situation of child abuse in this country, the protection of paedophiles in the Blair government as well, in the Houses of Westminster. And who is this woman? You were an absolute threat, and you had to try to be silenced. So they laughingly said to me, were you, when you came down escalators in the tube, were you holding on tight and never went near the edge? I went, what are you saying? You have got no idea. Somebody could have pushed you. And I still find that remarkable, that all I did, what I thought was what every mother would do. I didn't think I was doing anything extraordinary. I still don't. I just was so angry. So I've never known anger like it. It was like a burning laser right through to my soul. And I thought, I can't have this. I did everything to protect my 4 children, because I have a daughter as well. And I thought, I can't be the only one. And it was my husband, my second husband, who said, you won't be the other mother. You won't be the only mother. And then I started going into prisons, but I have never been silenced. I refuse to be silenced. And that is the trouble with this crime. The paedophile circles are massive. And from top to bottom across society, it's like the Olympic rings. And
I agree. I agree.
Only need to make the wrong name to somebody. You don't know how high and how deep it goes.
Oh, absolutely. I know it's not a great terrain to work in, really, but sometimes we don't make these choices. They kind of choose us.
They find you, exactly right.
They do find us. So just talk to me a little bit about that D-notice. So what it was saying, signed by Tony Blair, was you weren't allowed to mention Cyril Smith and these people?
Leon Britton, Lord Janner, those 3 names we know have now been public names in this regard.
Absolutely.
Yeah? And
tested at the child abuse inquiry, and there were definitely issues over Lord Janner, no doubt about it.
Without a doubt.
What they said on his death was there was definitely enough, at least, to have interviewed him over a number of the children who said they interviewed them in care homes. But they just allowed them to die off, didn't they?
Yeah, and yes, that's right. And the cover-ups, you see, this is the trouble. I mean, I knew police that had known about those 3 men and the other 3. I just wish I could remember their names, but those 3 particularly I'm safe to mention, because they have been in, and I was on Adam Bolton's show, Sky News Tonight, at the time, and somebody who knew Lord Janner was there, and she was banging on about, oh, well, I know, blah, 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 I knew him. You do not know him. You don't know anyone. You don't know if I'm one. You have no idea.
And you know better than anybody that you don't know people in those situations, because the thing obviously about child abusers is they're extremely cunning, and they are usually very charming also.
They are very charming, very manipulative, very plausible. They have the same blueprint of operating, because I have been going into, at the start, I thought, how does this begin then? Why was my so-called now friend, why was he like he was and I'm not? What made him like it? And I'm always been that irritating child that was always going, why? That's how you learn. Not enough people ask why, and that's because they don't have a thirst for learning. So that's why I started going into prisons. I thought, right, I'm going to sit in front of them. I want them to tell me, and you can't shut them up, because they so love to talk about what they've done. They see it as a badge of honor, yeah. And a lot of them would try and humiliate me, and I don't play that game. I've got a little button here, and you could be taken back to your cell, and you'll be, stripped of any of your whatever it is freedoms within prison. So I said, let's not just get clever. I want to learn from you when you started, when it began, and I have documents here that show this is the behavior of a very strongly wired paedophile. I want you to tell me, is that you? The 4 stages you go through, is that you? And how did it start? And it was really interesting what they came up with.
Wow.
And how the brokenness started from their very early years.
Mind-blowing. All of this and more you will be able to hear about on the long form video. So Marilyn, just talk to me about the BBC. And the reason I want to talk about the BBC is I believe, as indeed do you, I know because I've heard you believe that the BBC is a long-term problem, isn't it? Jimmy Savile was not the only problem. And the recent stuff with Hugh Edwards, who was, their much vaunted main anchor for News at 10. He was so cherished. He was chosen to oversee and comment on the Queen's funeral. That's a huge honor in broadcasting. I wouldn't necessarily see it as an honor, but a lot of them people do. And he would be one of them. And he was given a phenomenal salary. And even when the police investigation started, Marilyn, the salary continued. And now BBC, after the event, are saying they want their money back. But Hugh Edwards, who would have thought that about Hugh Edwards? He was receiving and making what they call indecent images. And this is where I want to bring you in. You don't like people referring to them as these indecent images, do you?
They're not indecent images. They're not chopping up. They are real children really being abused, being raped, being murdered, snuff videos, you know, where for the gratification of these creeps. And what annoys me, I'm sorry, I'm getting wound up now.
Wind.
What annoys me is people are trying to dumb it down.
Right.
Tough luck, name it. Tell it what it is. It's like this awful thing that people now are calling, or we don't want to call people paedophiles anymore. They want to call them MAPs.
Oh,
MAPs is
minor attracted person.
minor attracted persons. No, you are a paedophile, okay? Just live with it and get on with it. And what comes your way, you frankly deserve.
Absolutely.
And so Hugh Edwards, just look at him though. He had that arrogance. He had that perfect way of presenting himself. People did report him for some certain things, but the BBC are horrific. It wasn't just Jimmy Savile, was it? It was Stuart Hall. It was Rolf Harris.
Yes.
It was, and outside their
Yes.
premises, they've
Chris
got,
Denning, there were BBC
Yes, that's
radio disc jockeys as well. And I know what you're going to talk about. You're going to talk about the Eric Gill statue.
Gill, yes.
Right. So Eric Gill, everybody, a lot of people who are watching this are familiar with this because I have fought against this statue for so long. Eric Gill, of course, was not just an abuser of his sister, not just a paedophile of his children, but he's also into bestiality and raped his dog. And that is the statue outside Broadcasting House, which, Marilyn, I'm sure you know, they not only refuse to take down, but they're now going to spend even more money protecting it after it's been attacked.
And that amount comes to now also funded, I kid you not, by Westminster Council.
What?
Yes. And I was interviewed by the Daily Mail 3 weeks ago. They did a Freedom of Information Act. And so far, the BBC have £300,000 to actually repair this statue. Now, I don't know where their brains are. Who are the people that do the PR? Who are the people that statue, people will go out of their way to still damage it. There is no empathy for the people that will walk past that statue who have nothing to do with the BBC, who have been raped, sexually abused as a child, whatever, have to look at that Pratt standing there, carved in whatever he's carved in. I mean, it's outrageous. It is utterly outrageous. And yet we have to pull down other statues around the country, you know, let's like try and get rid of Winston Churchill or whoever it was, or the people that long time ago, many years ago, were active in slave trade, which was awful. Dreadful, but absolutely hideous.
But but it's not, everything is not being treated equally, is it?
No, it's not.
There's some priorities over others. And the thing is that I think both you and I know is child abuse is not given any priority.
It's not.
Well, not just in this country, but in the world, though.
In the world. Shall I tell you the figures? And this is just because I do so much research on this. I saw a figure, and it has to be worse than this, given that 70-80% of cases globally are never talked about, never reported, because you're so frightened of doing so, because you won't be believed or whatever, yeah? And the law isn't as robust as it should be in some countries. But UNICEF figures were, the last time I looked, 1 in 20 girls under 18 are raped before they're 18. 1 in 20. Now, given 70% don't report, that's massive. If you look at the number of girls across the child exploitation, the child trafficking that goes on around the world, and no one wants to talk about it because, let me go in my bubble. Let me look at the roses in my rose garden. You know what? Every one of us knows a child abuser.
Yeah.
It's that common. They are in every street.
Yeah, for sure.
One of us knows someone who's been abused, but you might not know who they are. I didn't know for donkey's years that my sister, who is now 78, she told me when she was 60 years old that she had been raped by our uncle for 4 years.
Lord.
And she only spoke about it because I was doing this work, and that unpacked her, and she told about it. So she was 60 when she said,
Carrying the
it
shame.
happened to her when she
Carrying the
was
shame
12.
that isn't hers. It's absolutely
No.
horrendous. It's terrible. And also, what we've also learned in recent years is how difficult it's been for boys to talk about
Oh,
the
yes.
abuse that they've suffered as
Yes.
well. Because there's it's taboo,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. So my son, one of my boys particularly, he got really aggressive one night, angry, and rightly so, you know. But my husband, I say my current husband, and my husband says to me, "Where am I going?" And he
You're
had
a
been abused
powerhouse.
when he was at a prep school in Leeds when he was a little boy, right? And that was, you know, the stars were aligned when we met, to be honest, because he'd never told anybody, and he was 52 when he met me.
Wow.
He's now 79, right? And he started telling me as we got into this work, we'd only been married 2 years when all this hit our lives. And he said, leave the boys to me because I was abused. And he took Michael down the pub one night, and Mike was only about 16. And he said to Roger, he said, am I gay? And Roger said, well, even if you are, so what? He said, well, I've only touched a man and had a man touch me. And does that make me gay? Well, you know, isn't that awful?
Yeah, it's awful.
And Roger had to say, no, that's a creep. It's not your blame.
Yeah, you've been abused. It's big diff, isn't it? Big difference.
And he's, you know, and Roger was great. He used to sit the boys down once a week and say, right, where are we, lads? And my daughter was away traveling. Where are we, lads? And my daughter blamed me, actually, because she said to me, when I was 6, Mum, at that school, I told you I didn't like him. I told you he was a creep. Everybody else liked him and I didn't. And you told me because I was so rude to him. When was I ever rude to anyone? And I did, because I was his deputy. I said, you've got to write apologetic notes.
Oh,
so
bless.
Because I didn't listen to her, she didn't talk to me for 6 months. And she said, you never asked me why I didn't like him, Mum. And that's true. I didn't ask why.
I think you can all tell that the long video is going to be absolutely explosive, and I implore you to watch it. I will make sure that there are links available next week so you can see it in full. Thank you so much for joining us on the birthday stream, Marilyn. It's been an absolute pleasure. It is. It's my birthday stream. And this, everybody, is Marilyn Hawes. Catch her next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Coming up is somebody that I'm sure many of you know. He was prepared to put his head above the parapet, even though he had a nice cushy job at Sky Sports, but he still did it anyway. It is, of course, Matt Le Tissier. I am absolutely delighted to be joined by one of our most cherished former footballers, Matt Le Tissier. He spent his footballing career at Southampton, where fans nicknamed him Le God for obvious reasons, if you've seen any of his videos. And he represented England on the international stage on numerous occasions. But Matt has shown leadership and bravery far beyond the football pitch. These days, he's continued to lead where others will hopefully eventually follow. And he bravely spoke out during C-19 and about Ukraine and other really pressing, important issues. And I've got Matt here today because there's been something of a type of chaos taking place on our fair island, Matt, over the last couple of weeks. We've seen protests and riots and so much anger on our street. We've had fast-tracked convictions, censorship on social media. Matt, what the hell is going on?
What the hell is going on? Well, to me, it feels like this country is very quickly turning into North Korea. That's what it feels like to me. Being done very subtly, but actually accelerating quite quickly since the new Labour government took over, who are equally, if not worse than the last Tory government. And so, yeah, I mean, all the riots and the protests that are happening, I question, as you know, I question everything these days, Sonia, and I don't know if they're just overplaying the far right angle, because obviously the government always want us to be frightened of some kind of boogeyman. First it's the invisible virus, then it's wars, then it's climate change, you know, all that kind of stuff. And it just seems like the far right one is the latest boogeyman they want everyone to be frightened of. And I'm not sure just how much of it actually exists.
I mean, I think that's a really good point. And if you were just saying that, like in a void where there was no precedent to it, then there would be every reason to question you in depth about that sort of comment. But the truth is you've just outlined the exact precedence of how we are always being forced, aren't we, to focus our anger and attention on very narrow targets. And the thing is, Matt, I mean, I've looked at the people on the street. I've talked to people who have been out there on the street, and as in anything, you're always going to have interlopers, infiltrators. These things always happen, especially with protests, right? But I don't think for a second that those protests are made up entirely of far-right racists, right? I think there are people there with genuine concerns. Do you understand the anger on the street, Matt?
I certainly can understand the concern from people, what's happening in this country at the moment, the attack on our freedom of speech. For instance, you know, the threats coming from the Met Police about policing your social media posts, the threats that even if you're just watching a protest or a riot, that you could be arrested for that. I mean, seriously, this is very troubling times when it comes to what's happening with our government. And I think they're overplaying their hand, and I think more and more people are very open to the idea that these people in government are not to be trusted.
And the thing is that, as you say, this has all happened so quickly. I mean, Keir Starmer, or Sir Keir Rodney Starmer, to get it correct, he's only been in power as such since 6th of July, right? Just over a month. Part of that, they've been on holiday, the MPs, and it would appear that he is the most totalitarian, draconian PM so far. Do you think that this was I mean, I do think that he was all kind of voted in legitimately, even though the whole uni-party, two-party system isn't itself democratic. But I don't think that the polls were necessarily rigged in order to be able to put him to PM. But I think it was always determined that he was going to. Do you see it as like a handing over of the baton from one WEF to another? Or is that just kind of, is it conspiracy theory?
No, I think that's exactly what it is. I don't think there's any conspiracy involving it. You just got to look at the people who are involved at the World Economic Forum, you know, those who support it. I mean, Keir Starmer was asked the question directly, would you prefer Davos or Westminster? And his answer was Davos. You know, and that is the Prime Minister of our country actually putting other people before his own, and the people that put him there to govern us. It's just absolutely crazy that he would be there in plain sight telling everybody that he doesn't really care about the British people. You know, he prefers the people at the World Economic Forum, and that is incredibly telling. So there's no conspiracy in that. It's there in black and white, unless, of course, it was an AI-generated interview and they just made it all up.
I mean, it's not impossible anymore, is it? I mean, it is absolutely mad. I do think he's like the most WEFist of WEFs prime ministers that we've ever had. And we've had some awful, obviously reprehensible ones, no doubt about it. But and I can't help but thinking that it's not a coincidence that he's a former DPP, Director of Public Prosecutions, because he's all about banging these people up and so punishing. I mean, Lucy Connolly, she appeared in court yesterday, remanded until September. She had written a post. She's a councillor's wife. She'd written a post, obviously a very angry post. I didn't agree with the sentiment of it, but I still don't agree with the level of censorship and convictions that are taking place. But what was weird, Matt, was the guy, Tyler Kay, who actually stood in solidarity with her and quoted her post. He's already been convicted and imprisoned. And I mean, it's extraordinary. They're literally turning out of jails more frightening, violent criminals than they are actually currently imprisoning. Make it make sense, Matt.
We can't make it make sense because, I mean, I personally feel like this is all part of a plan to scare the people, to keep us afraid. So they've made an example of these people with fast tracking them into prison and basically saying, look, this is what's going to happen if you do it. Don't you dare do it. And it seems pretty obvious to me. And as you say, there's chaos in the country. And the one big thing that I've kind of learned over the last few years was the phrase "order out of chaos," and where that comes from.
Talk to us about it.
Well, I mean, it's all to do with the Freemasons, and I think it's to do with heading towards a one world government. All that kind of stuff. There's enough evidence out there that people want to go and have a look. That it's all kind of heading in that direction, and the role of the mainstream media in all of this is to stop you from thinking that. Is to divert you in any way they can away from you thinking about that, because I think that's the end game. That's the end game, and the media is there to divert your attention away so that not enough people realize what's going on.
And also legacy media, mainstream media, they benefit from censorship online, because obviously we've taken a lot of their audience. You know, people like you and I who have become content creators, we've taken mainstream media's audience to a certain degree, and that is increasing, and they don't want that. Obviously, there used to be a time when they had complete control over narratives, and suddenly with the advent of social media and such, they no longer have. And we can also fact check them in real time. So obviously mainstream media, and I know because I worked in the place for 3 decades, so I know how they function. I know how they hate social media. But even I'm shocked at how they've been prepared to go along with this attack on our free speech. I mean, I think that is quite shocking, isn't it? Have you known anything like it in your lifetime?
No, I never thought I'd see anything like it in my lifetime either. It really is a covert takeover of this country, is what it seems to be. And yeah, I think Keir Starmer was prepped quite a while back to that he was going to become Prime Minister at some point. And I think there's probably others already lined up for in 10 years' time. I really do. They put these people in positions. You know, where did Rishi Sunak come from? You know, he just came out of nowhere to be Chancellor of the Exchequer. You know, it's just bizarre that these people just crop up from absolutely nowhere, and all of a sudden they're in a position of great power. And for what did they do to get there? I don't
That
get
is
it.
the eternal question, isn't it? What did they do to get there? I mean, Matt, so the thing is, we know that Rishi Sunak was literally put in place, right? They removed Boris Johnson, who love him or hate him. He was still actually voted into position by the British public, but they removed him. And Nadine Dorries covers it in her book very well, actually. But they removed him and put in Rishi Sunak. Now, I suspect they put in Rishi Sunak because of his experience with digitalization, his family company, Infosys, as one example, the fact that he's a former banker, and it all came together. We are heading towards central bank digital currency, aren't we? And I think they're just looking for the right person to take us there. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, that's one of the things that they need to be in place. They need the digital IDs to be in place, because once that's done and they have central bank digital currency and they get rid of cash, they have complete control over every aspect of your life. And that's what these psychopaths are after. And that's what we have to stop. So at all costs, do not accept digital ID.
Do you use cash at all, Matt? I always make sure to take cash out every Friday. You what?
I love cash. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's just a way of keeping the government's nose out of your business.
Yes.
And anything that can do that, I've said to people, you know, do as much in your life that you can, that you don't have to rely on government. The less you can rely on government, the better your life will be.
I always keep cash by the side of me, just as a friendly reminder, because it's just so important. You're absolutely right. Obviously, they can't track and trace us in the same way as they can when we're using cards. And cards are so anti-people in many respects. They're anti-small business because it costs, obviously the small businesses for when people use them. But it's to assume that everybody has a bank account, that everybody has debit or credit cards, and not everybody does. And I think that that whole thing is really kind of of anti-poor and doesn't really understand how a lot of people function. But I do think it's really important that we have this pushback and we have people like you. I wish there were more like you. Matt, why are so few famous people prepared to speak out? Even now, when we see all the madnesses, we see all the insane imagery at the Olympics, at the opening and closing ceremony. It's very little about sport. I mean, as a sportsman, did you see any of those ceremonies?
No, I didn't. I deliberately don't watch those ceremonies because I
Good
know exactly
shout.
about now. You know, having watched the 2012 one retrospectively and seen what that was all about. They are, I think they are satanic rituals, quite frankly. So they're pretty shocking. So yeah, it's a shame. You know, I love sport. You know, and I've grown up. My whole life has been about sport. You know, I'm still trying to play at my ripe old age of 55 as many sports as I can.
You love
So
golf.
I think it's good for you. You know, I think it's good for you, not only your physical health but your mental health as well.
Right.
So yeah, very disappointing to see sport being hijacked in the way that it has been.
And it has, hasn't it? We have obviously men who identify as women in women's sport. And I think the whole Olympics thing was absolutely mad and insane. But because there's so much going on in the UK, hardly anybody didn't even see the closing ceremony. It certainly wasn't commented on, but it was as mad as the opening ceremony. The opening ceremony was absolutely mad. They abused Christianity in a way that they wouldn't abuse other religions. And I think I'm not a Christian and I don't, subscribe to any religion, but I can clearly see that they make differences. There's no doubt about it. And I think that is part of also creating problems within our country because there appears to be favoritism towards certain cultures, towards certain religions. Is that a fair point?
Oh, of course, it's a fair point. Yeah, there's you know, two-tier Kia wasn't trending for no apparent reason. There's double standards all over the place when it comes to religion, when it comes to crime. Depending on what race you are, will depend on the severity of your punishment. You know, we're seeing people getting jail time for mean social media hurty words, and yet you're getting rapists who are getting suspended sentences. And it just beggars belief that our country is being allowed to go down this route.
It is actually shocking and it's horrible as a journalist to have watched it and not just watched it, obviously tried to do something about it, but it becomes this sort of avalanche, which is why it's even more important to have voices like you out there because there's only so much a journalist can do. But when you start to have people who actually have created a name for themselves in another field, then that can also bring on board a whole other audience of people who are waking up. And you've woken people up, Matt. There's no doubt about it. The responses you get, that must be very heartening to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a tough road because when I went against the narrative at the start over the COVID stuff, obviously there was a massive backlash against that on my social media with the replies, and it was, you know, it was difficult to stand by your convictions because you had a coordinated attack on social media trying to shut me up. But you know, I believed very much in what I was saying, and I wasn't put off by the social media campaigns to try to silence me. And I think that's important. It's important to stand up for your beliefs, what you believe in, and you know what? Sometimes I might have been wrong, and on those occasions when I feel I was wrong, I deleted any post and I apologise for them, which is what I think we all should do if we get something wrong. But it seems that a lot of people aren't prepared to do that. They will just double down and keep digging when they're in trouble. So yeah, that was one aspect of things. But as I say, the responses I get now are very different to the ones I was getting 4 years ago.
Oh,
So
really? Oh,
yeah,
that's interesting.
a massive turnaround in the volume of. I literally went from having 95% of people slagging me off for every post that I made to now I'm getting like 5% of people slagging me off, and 95% of people going, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
Wow. Because you know, obviously what they say, the difference between a conspiracy theory and a conspiracy fact is now only 3 months. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's really where we're up to. And it's lovely, isn't it? But the thing is you had to weather that storm to begin with. And I remember the mainstream media came after you. They doxed you. They were after your family and everything. Now that's difficult, isn't it? We had on the show on Monday, David Clues from Unity News Network, and they've now turned on him. I don't know if you've seen any of that. The Times, the Record in Scotland. And it's interesting because these are commonly known as left and right newspapers. So that means there's not even a particular kind of left or right wing that's going after him now. And that's what I say, going back to mainstream media, they have to silence alternative media because we've taken their audience. But we haven't just taken their audience, Matt. We're also highlighting, by our very presence, we highlight what liars they are. And that is really problematic for them. So I think you've done brilliantly to withstand it all. But also, isn't it a better way to live, though, the way you're living? The fact is you can live with yourself because you're doing the very best you can to raise awareness to what's going wrong in this world.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, it's nice to be able to put my head on the pillow at night and sleep soundly. Knowing that I feel like I've stood up for myself, stood up for what I believe in. And there are plenty of people in the media spotlight who've messaged me privately, telling me how much they agree with me, and but they can't say anything because they want to keep their job. And the fact that we live in that kind of society should be enough for people to go, hang on a minute, I need to say something here. I don't want to live in a communist country. This is heading in a very, very bad direction. Censorship. It is absolutely shocking. And one day they will go for those people. They will go for them. They'll expect the likes of me and you to stand up for them. Yeah. And because we're decent, good human beings. We will. Probably will.
Yes, that is the reality. Absolutely, we will. And the thing is that they obviously tried to cancel you. You had a good gig. You had a punditry gig at, was it Sky Sports?
Yep. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I was there for best part of 18 years, I think it was in the end.
Wow.
Those under contract. And yeah, it just went in about a 2-minute Zoom call. Saying that there was no longer any work there for me, not giving me a specific reason, although I think we can all work out why that was. I was highly critical of the news channels through COVID, and I don't think they liked that. But I felt it was too important not to say anything, and I probably realised at some point it would cost me my job. But hey ho, there's other ways of making a living.
There certainly is. Matt, let me just bring you onto this. And that is, I've got to ask you about X, Elon Musk, obviously, arguably one of the world's richest men. Is he a savior of free speech, or do you think he bought X for some other reason?
Yeah, I'm not convinced that it's a totally free speech platform at this point. I know that I get lots of messages from people saying, "Oh, we never see your tweets anymore. We never see your posts."
I don't see your posts.
I for the people that I really like to follow, I'll put on the notifications to make sure that I'm notified every time they do a post. But if I hadn't have done that, I was missing people's posts for many years, and I don't think it's particularly changed too much at the moment. So for all the praise that he's got for it being a free speech platform, it's not quite as free as you think it might be.
Right. And what do you make of all of this kind of challenging, confrontational stuff with the British government threatening to sue Humza Yousaf for being a racist? What do you make of all that? Is that kind of showboating, or do you think there's really some substance to it?
I think it's probably bread and circuses, to be honest.
Right.
I think there's a lot of diversionary tactics going on, as I said before, to keep your eye off the real goal of this. And I think all that kind of stuff is just people, taking their focus away from where it should be. And I think there's a lot of that goes on, especially in the media.
Matt, you've become a real passionate advocate over, I don't know how long the period has been, for CBD. Talk to us about that.
It's been just over a year now. Anthony Fowler at Supreme CBD asked me to get involved, and I wasn't really very keen, to be honest. I didn't really want to go down that route. I didn't know anything about it, so I didn't want to just kind of start advertising it to my followers. And so I said, no, I'm all right, thanks, mate. And he kept on me. About 6 months later, he came back again. He went, "Are you sure?" He said, "Why don't you just try it?" And so I said, okay, I'll give it a try, and that way then I can make up my own mind if it works, if it's, if it says what it does on the tin. And so I did, and then he sent me some gummies and some oils, and my wife used the oils, and she noticed a very big difference. And I was taking the gummies to just before bed, and I was getting such beautiful restful sleep, and I was waking up the next morning thinking, oh, this is nice. I don't have that drowsy feeling anymore in the mornings. And I thought, blimey, yeah, this stuff really does what it says on the tin. So that's why I decided to become an affiliate for them, and have been a big advocate for it.
Clearly, and we will put a link in the description below. And there is also at checkout, if they use the code TIS40, you get 40% off the product, right?
You do, anything you buy on the website. They've always got really good deals on as well, and bundles on stuff. So yeah, and even when there's been a deal that's been discounted, you can still, on top of that discount, if you use the code TIS40, still get 40% off on top of that as well.
Brilliant. Listen, Matt, thank you so much for talking to us today. Absolute pleasure as ever. I do love talking to Matt Le Tissier because he's bold, and I love bold people. Everybody, this is the wonderful Matt Le Tissier.
Thanks, Sonia.
Thank you so much for everything. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for the mods, wonderful mods, Shin and Zoe. Thank you to my wonderful guests, Only Cans, Matt Le Tissier, Marilyn Hawes. Thank you for all your contributions, and thank you so much to my patrons at Patreon. I greatly appreciate you, and for everybody who makes this live stream and the shows that I do possible. Thank you so very much. I'll see you again on Monday when we will be back to the regular live stream. Have a wonderful weekend. See you then. Take excellent care of yourself.